The latest bombshell to shatter the already fragile calm of Los Angeles's most scandal-ridden families arrived like a thunderclap from the operating room, long after Luna Nozawa's pulse flatlined and the monitors fell silent. The young woman somehow found the strength to utter final, haunting words, an admission, a warning, a plea that cut straight through the fog of grief and suspicion. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," she rasped, voice quivering yet clear enough to record on the OR's open mic system. "There's more to this than you know, Steffi. Trust me, I didn't fire that first shot." Those words, captured on a hidden recorder and leaked within hours to every major outlet from the Sunset Boulevard tabloid racks to the hallowed discussion boards of daytime drama devotees, transformed what many presumed to be a straightforward narrative. Luna's tragic spiral into violence, culminating in one final, desperate act, into a twisting labyrinth of unanswered questions. Fans, who had long predicted Luna's demise as the inevitable endgame of her vendetta against Steffy Forrester, recoiled at the suggestion that the gunshot which felled both Luna and the heroic Sheila Carter might not have been Luna's handiwork alone. Indeed, the forensic team led by Detective Baker confirmed that the bullet casings recovered at the scene did not all match. Two distinct calibers lay side by side on the stainless steel tray where Luna's body had been placed, one small, one larger. Yet no witness had come forward to assert that two individuals had fired rounds at nearly the same time. The fragmentation of the ballistic evidence catalyzed a whirlwind of conspiracy theories. If Luna hadn't pulled the trigger on herself or on Sheila, who had? Had someone else been lurking in the shadows of that crudely finished art school hall? Had Steffi, cornered by Luna's desperate aim, reacted faster than anyone realized, fending off the younger woman's rifle only to fire her own shot in panic? In the days following the incident, Steffi was quietly escorted to a sterile interrogation room within the Los Angeles Police Department, her designer couture replaced by an ill-fitting jumpsuit that did nothing to soften her terror-stricken countenance. For hours she sat across from two detectives, her hands trembling so violently she could scarcely lift a glass of water, her voice cracking when she answered simple questions about the sequence of events. Yet each time they pressed her. "Did you fire the gun? Where did the shot that struck Sheila originate? Are you holding anything back?" Her gaze shuddered like a frightened animal's, and the only words she could sputter were fragments of denial and fear. I don't remember, and I just wanted to save everyone." As a result, she offered no formal testimony, and under California law, without her own coerced confession to prove it, the possibility remained that Steffi herself had been the second shooter. Meanwhile, Luna lay between life and death in the same hospital that had been the site of her final breath, her survival hung by a thread piece of gauze, each shallow intake of breath a silent bullet in the dying struggle she had unleashed. Sheila Carter, who had once so ruthlessly schemed her way into the Forrester and Finnegan lives, and then so selflessly thrown herself into the fray to wrest that gun from Luna, also remained unresponsive, her consciousness locked away behind fields of intravenous fluid and the steady hum of life support machinery. The hospital's corridors teemed with uniformed officers and grim-faced detectives as the investigation splintered into medical malpractice review, homicide inquiry, and a labyrinthine detective chase for the phantom second shooter. At Poppy Nozawa's insistence, she who had already pressed manslaughter charges against Dr. Finnegan for allegedly shortening the defibrillator interval. Authorities dispatched a dedicated team to scour every inch of the OR, the adjacent hallways, and the student gallery for surveillance, fingerprints, fiber matches, and the all-important smoking gun. But while the medical examiner's initial report had attributed Sheila's and Luna's wounds to Luna's single-fired shot, an almost poetic final twist of fate, it could not account for the differing calibers that Detective Baker announced at a tense press briefing, his tone laced with both forensic certainty and exasperated bewilderment. "We have bullets from two different firearms," Baker declared, lifting one shiny casing in his latex-gloved hand and then another, marginally larger, in the other. That means at least 2 people fired on the victims. We do not yet have evidence that conclusively identifies the second shooter, nor do we know whether that person intended to save lives or further endanger them. News of the dual calibers ignited an online inferno, with hashtags like #2bullets1truth and #WhoShotSteffy trending across social platforms. Soap columns ran wild with speculation. Was Liam Spencer, who had rushed headlong into the chaos only to be felled by one of Luna's bullets in an earlier shootout, somehow involved? Did someone from Forrester Creations sneak in to protect Steffy? Could Rich himself, furious over Luna's kidnapping of his grandson Hayes, have drawn his own weapon in a desperate attempt to end the bloodshed? None of these theories bore out under scrutiny. No license records tied any Forrester or Spencer to an unregistered handgun, and none of the hospital-adjacent streets yielded surveillance of a clandestine shooter. All the while, Steffy's own inability to recall her actions left investigators suspended in a standoff between what they could prove in court and what they suspected in their hearts. Into this vacuum of certainty stepped the attorneys representing Steffy. A coalition of Forrester and Finnegan legal counsel who argued that their client had been placed under extreme duress, her mental state compromised by the trauma of repeated violence at Luna's hands, and therefore could not be held accountable for involuntary discharge of a firearm. They petitioned the court to grant Steffy immunity under California's self-defense under extreme emotional disturbance clause, asserting that if she did indeed fire the shot that struck Luna and Sheila, she did so only to protect herself and Finn's family, an act of reflexive heroism rather than premeditated homicide. Their motion, filed under seal, cited case law going back decades to instances where battered spouses had responded with lethal force while under psychological siege. The defense even referenced Luna's own string of violent offenses, kidnapping, threats, previous shots fired, as justification for Steffy's state of mind. Yet in the public court of opinion, those arguments rang hollow to fans who remembered Luna as a frightened girl lashing out in misguided attempts at connection, and Sheila as a twisted heroine whose final sacrifice had saved Steffy's life. Many called the notion that Steffy, mother of 3 and fashion design magnate, would open fire on her would-be assailant an affront to her character, a plot twist too dark even for B&B's storied history. Meanwhile, Finn Finnegan, once branded a villain in Poppy's reckless lawsuit, watched the investigation from the confines of his psychiatric diversion program with mounting horror. Each new revelation about the Orr shooting, each mention of a second shooter, each breath of uncertainty about Steffy's role, sent him spiraling deeper into guilt and dread. He feared that the truth, whatever it was, would destroy not only his own sanity, but the family he had fought so hard to protect. And so he buried himself in mental health therapy, determined to emerge lucid enough to comfort Steffy if she were charged and to testify truthfully about what he saw in those final seconds before the shots rang out. As months passed without a second shooter being formally charged, and with both Luna's condition and Sheila's unresponsiveness prolonging the agony of an eyewitness account, public pressure mounted on District Attorney Andrea Vaughn to bring the case before a grand jury. Vaughn, who had been elected on a platform of transparency and tough love for violent offenders, faced a political storm. Commentaries lambasted her for inaction, daughters of social media influencers demanded swift justice, and talk radio hosts sneered at the absence of a neat resolution. But Vaughn's office proceeded with caution, recognizing that indicting Steffy without incontrovertible proof could shatter public trust and expose the DA to costly civil suits. Instead, Vaughn convened an extraordinary panel of legal and mental health experts to advise on whether Steffy's emotional state at the time met the threshold for criminal intent or for an insanity defense. Their deliberations, conducted in private chambers beneath the downtown courthouse, became the subject of rumor mills of their own. Some claimed that the panel was preparing to recommend against charges, citing Steffy's decompensated PTSD from Luna's earlier rampage. Others whispered that Papi Nozawa was lobbying state legislators to amend self-defense statutes mid-trial, aiming to codify parental rage as a standalone offense. Through it all, the families waited in suspended animation, Steffy confined to her sleek, austere home under a court-ordered curfew, Bill Spencer juggling board meetings with discreet dinners to strategize legal maneuvers, Finn's solemn visage haunting the corridors of the psychiatric ward. Rich Forrester oscillating between protective fury on Steffy's behalf and sorrowful guilt for having once welcomed Luna into the family fold. And in the hushed chapel where Luna's makeshift memorial still stood, a single candle flickered beside a framed photograph of the girl, once so eager to win a place in her father's orbit, now eternally suspended between life and promise. It was in that chapel, one rain-soaked evening, that Steffy Forrester finally found her voice. The DA had just informed her that no charges would be filed against her, pending the grand jury's final deliberation, on condition that she submit to a battery of psychiatric evaluations and participate in a restorative justice dialogue with Papi Nozawa. Summoned before Papi, the room pulsed with the weight of unshed tears and unspoken grief. Steffy, gowns of soft ivory draped around her trembling shoulders, stepped forward and, with surprising clarity, admitted, "I did fire the shot. When Luna raised that weapon at me, I believed I was staring down the end of everything, my family, my future, my life. I didn't think. I acted on instinct to save myself and my children's mother. I'm sorry it harmed Luna and Sheila. I never meant to inflict more pain on this world." The admission, recorded by court stenographers and broadcast in edited form by Evening News, stunned viewers and prosecutors alike. Papi, poised behind a lectern strewn with legal briefs, exhaled a long breath before replying, her voice raw, "Your fear cost you, Steffy. My daughter was violent, yes, but she was still a child who needed help, not a target. I forgive you because I must for my own sanity, but I cannot pretend this was anything less than a tragedy born of fear and hatred." In that moment, the endless swirl of rumors and speculation coalesced into a shared recognition of human frailty. That Luna's final words, once a cryptic plea for Steffy's innocence, had heralded not a vindication but a reckoning, that the question of who fired which bullet had transformed from a forensic puzzle into a moral crucible. And that in a world where trauma begets trauma, the line between savior and perpetrator can blur in a heartbeat. The grand jury, swayed by Steffy's candid confession and by the expert panel's findings on extreme emotional disturbance, ultimately declined to indict her, closing the case with a notation that criminal charges were neither warranted nor just. Papi Nozawa, exhausted but unbowed, issued a final statement acknowledging the resolution while reaffirming her belief that the legal system had failed Luna. Today's decision does not erase the pain or the questions. Luna's death remains a void in our lives, and I will work to ensure that no other child is driven to such desperation. Steffy, cleared of criminal wrongdoing but forever changed by the ordeal, retreated into the solace of family and her fashion atelier, dedicating each future collection to the memory of the two women she could not save. Finn, released from psychiatric care under strict conditions of ongoing therapy, returned to surgery with a new mission: to advocate for trauma-informed treatment of violent or mentally ill patients. And Sheila Carter, awakened from her coma weeks later to fragmented reports of events she barely recognized, confronted the stark reality that her final act of heroism had been both life-saving and tragically incomplete. In the end, the dual-caliber mystery that had set tongues wagging across the city found its resolution not in bullets or ballistics, but in the raw confessions of those bound by sorrow and survival. Luna's last words echoed as a testament to her fractured psyche and to the desperate human longing for understanding, even when that understanding arrives too late to save a life. And as the fictional streets of Los Angeles settled once more into their rhythm of design launches, boardroom intrigue, and family secrets, one imperative remained etched in every heart, that when fear ignites violence, it takes not only justice, but compassion to heal the wounds left behind.
Oh.